So anyway, we lived in Northridge. Okay, John was working in Santa Monica, which was just fine. And we had Tom and Troy living with us. And Tom was going to the 2-year college in Santa Monica, and Troy was going to the high school in Santa Monica. And then Troy went to the high school. No, he graduated from the high school in Santa Monica because there was a problem with transportation to the high school in Northridge. And so John could drive Troy to the high school in Santa Monica on his way to work at Douglas. And same thing with Tom. And then Tim was still going to school out in Malibu, and so he lived with his mother. And then, so we're living there, and I get pregnant. So then Tracy comes along. And so Tom goes and lives with his grandmother in West Los Angeles, and Troy stays with us, and Tim stays with his mother. So they were all split up at one point in time, which is, not a good thing. And then what happened? Oh, then Troy got into UCLA, and Tim was still going to school, and then Tim got into La Jolla. And then Tracy and I went to England in 1967 because we sold the house in Northridge, and John was working in Huntington Beach by that time. He used to drive from Northridge to Huntington Beach before there was a freeway. Mm-hmm. He used to do that every day with his friend Emily. Emily worked for him. And it was amazing. Anyway, so we sold the house in Northridge. Tracy and I went off to England, and John had to close out the house and move all the furniture and find a place to live in Huntington Beach. And he did all that, and he grumbled at me for quite a long time afterwards because he had to do all the work. And so I go off to England, and I get words back to him and saying, I want to buy an MG. And so the money we made on the house went on my MG. So I got an MGB.
All right.
It was shipped over from England to California. Anyway, so when we came back from England, we had a nice apartment on a golf course in Huntington Beach that John had found. And we lived there for a while, and then we got a house in Huntington Beach, and I lived there for 25 years. Lily never saw it, but Tracy lived there for a long time.
So actually the way the boys were brought up was very similar to the way you were, because you were away from home quite a lot of boarding school or boarding houses. So it wasn't really possible to have a nuclear family all the time there either.
No, I know nothing about a tight-knit family or anything. I'd sit with a woman at lunch and dinner most days, and she grew up in Novato, and her husband grew up, I think, in San Rafael. And she said, I said to her today, in fact, I said, well, because I told them about coming to do this with you. And so I said, have you ever done anything like this with your family? She said, we're all right here. We all know everything. We talk about everything because we're all here. Well, she does exaggerate, but apart from that, I mean, the idea was right. All her family is close by and they can talk about it. Whereas my family and John's family were totally split up.
Well, how common was divorce among your family in England? Was divorce? Because when I was growing up, divorce was almost totally non-existent.
It wasn't existent anywhere.
Because it was very difficult to get divorced. You had to prove infidelity.
Well, in England, you had to just go and shack up with a hooker in a hotel and get a photograph taken. There was one woman in Mildenhall who was divorced. And she had been married to a dentist. I never knew him, but I knew her and her son. And she was always regarded as being different because she was divorced, even though she came from one of the regular middle-class families in Mildenhall, one of the wealthier middle-class families, in fact. She never was respected. But on the other hand, she was a bit of a wuss. So that would be her own fault.
Anyway, now, you always refer to your parents as father and mother. Was that common among the people you knew, that they would refer to their parents so formally as opposed to mom and dad or whatever?
We never used mom.
Right.
The idea. But what happened with Cherry June and me is when we were in our teens, we read about the Mitford family. And the Mitford family called their father Far. And so we decided to call him Far.
How long did that last?
We still called him Far till he died.
Good. Well, that's the kind of detail I like. I like those details.
It suited him. All his friends called him Gov because it's short for governor. They didn't call him Answer. They always called him Gov. Mother we called Mummy. And I only refer them to as mother and father is because I think it sounds better than Mummy and Daddy.
Well, certainly as an adult. So your life when you came to the States was very busy with kids and work. So what did you do for fun?
Oh, we went to the now and again. We'd go to the beach. John, of course, loved watching the Dodgers. So when we had enough money to get tickets to the Dodgers, we would watch the Dodgers. But that was, we didn't go to a huge number of matches, but as many as we could afford.
Those were the days of the very good Dodgers, the Sandy Koufax Dodgers.
Yeah, it was fun going to the game. And, and then they had that group, that good infield going at one point. I can't even remember the name of the guys, but
Steve Garvey and Ron Say.
Yeah, Say. Yeah, John didn't like Ron Say.
Yeah. Steve Garvey.
And John loved to make disparaging remarks about Tommy Lasorda.
So did Giants fans.
I think a lot of people did.
But Tommy Lasorda was a good sport.
He was a good sport.
He would give it, and he would take it too.
He was. My friend Susan's boyfriend, Ed, is a lawyer, is a judge, and he got his invitations to a little gathering which was for Tommy Lasorda, and so I'd heard Tommy speak, and he was fine, but he had his friend with him who apparently was not good about race relations. I was in the Bank of America in Santa Monica and in Anais, and then I shifted to Union Bank in Panorama City. And then when we sold the house in Northridge in 1967, and moved to Huntington Beach, I decided at that point in time I needed a change. So I went to a private secretarial school to do shorthand and typing and learn how to carry myself because there was a model teacher there as well. And so anyway, so I did the shorthand and typing classes. And at the end of the course, the instructor said, well, we've got to look for a job. And this is how you start looking for a job. You go here, there, you go and look at the bulletin board of the Orange County personnel. You go and look. Anyway, she told us what to do. And she also had some paperwork with us. Anyway, the upshot of it is there was a vacancy in the public defender's office for a temporary secretary. I applied and got it. And then the temporary position became permanent because the person I was replacing died, and that was that. Was
there a civil service test to take, or was it simply just an interview?
Just the interview, as far as I recall.
Because now it's all testing.
Well, just to get it.
Yep.
Sure,
any civil service job, because of in the court system in Oakland, I had to take a test. Even I had to take a test for a toll collector on the bridge.
But that may not be true for Orange County.
It may not be, but I would think it would be, because they don't want jobs to be handed out without some sort of record of why the person is qualified.
Well, I remember. Okay, so I got my job with the Public Defender's Office in '68, and around 1971 or 2, I got a job with the clerk's office as a trainee for a courtroom clerk. because that was a very good pay. Now, I did have to take a test for that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a particular job you took a test for. Anyway, so I worked in the clerk's office for a couple of years, and then I realized I did not want to be a courtroom clerk. To be stuck in a courtroom with a judge and a stupid bailiff or reporter. Oh, God, So anyway, I went to the public defender and I said to him, can I come back? And he said, yes. So I had already started doing a little bit of investigation before I left, and they kept me on doing interviews and investigation after I stayed there for the rest of my career.
So the job started out doing investigations simply in files, or when did it start becoming interviews out in the city?
When did I start what?
When did you start doing field work as opposed to doing work with?
Well, the first thing you do is serve a couple of subpoenas. Then you go to a police station and pick up police reports. And then you go and take some photographs, and then you're told to talk to these witnesses, and it just sort of gradually increases. They'll give you, at first you just do, some bits and pieces from different cases, but then eventually they'll give you a whole case to work on. And then eventually you get promoted to being an investigator, and then you try to get promoted again so you make more money, and then you're doing robberies, and then you're doing homicides, and then you're doing death penalty.
Well, you also became friendly with one of the judges. Now, how do you get to know the judge so well?
Because he was a supervisor in my department before he became a judge. And before he was a supervisor, he was a lawyer in our office, yeah.
Okay.
And I wrote to him a care of somebody recently, and I've never heard back. I would really like to know what happened to him, but according to this intervening person, he is still alive. I don't know why he disappeared.
There could be many different.
He may have disappeared because he didn't want to come out of the closet. I've thought about this quite heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't want to come out of the closet in Orange County, maybe.
Yeah. Speaking of,
I worked late nights, till 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock a lot of the time. I was going to night school to police science classes so that I would know what the police were doing. And so that was always at night school. And then I was working with the AFS program, and John and I also worked on Beyond War. I mean, we always had stuff doing. We were always stuff. And then I was working with my friend Chris on the death penalty. There was always stuff going. I didn't have time to think about what was happening in Orange County.
Well, then you had, what, a 2-week vacation each year, or 3 weeks? Paid vacation?
No, it eventually became 4 weeks, I think.
So did you travel?
No, I went to England to see my parents.
And so you brought Tracy along?
Hmm?
Did you bring Tracy along every time? Or?
Oh, Tracy went with me most of the time, yes. And we also went, John and Tracy and I went up to Canada to stay with our friend at Lake of the Woods. And John and Tracy and I took a couple of road trips. But most of the time I would go over to, well, not probably every other year I'd go and see my parents.
Well, at some point, John got sick.
Okay, John, was some years older than I am. So in 1983, I think Tracy and I decided it was, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, which would have been okay, except that the growth had been missed the year before. He was having full exams, but the growth had been, or he had missed the appointment anyway. So the prostate cancer had spread to his pelvic bone. And so he had radiation for it and chemo and all the rest of it. And then he got a tumor somewhere else, and he had radiation. And then he had a tumor somewhere else, and just kept on growing, coming back. So he died in 1990, May 1990. But after he was diagnosed, I'm trying to think. Anyway, we had decided we would go to New Zealand because that's where he was born. Mm-hmm. He had an English father and a New Zealand mother. Anyway, so we just had decided we would go to New Zealand, and we had everything set up. And we got the diagnosis. So I said to his regular doctor, should we put that off until after he's had the treatment? And he said, no, go.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to New Zealand before he had any treatment. He was in a lot of pain, but it was probably the best thing to do because he probably wouldn't have gone after treatment.
So what was New Zealand like?
Oh, it's beautiful. We had a good time. We just drove around and looked at everything and saw a lot of sheep and not many people.
So who drove?
We both drove.
Okay.
He would get too tired to drive all the time. He liked it. He loved driving, and we both loved driving. So he would drive, and then when he got tired, I would drive.
So how long was the flight?
It's probably 3 weeks. I don't remember. We flew from here. Yeah, and there again, we had a reservation on a flight from Los Angeles to Auckland, and somehow or other that got messed up, or we got messed up. I don't remember which. And so we went and we finally flew from Los Angeles to Samoa, and we had a fairly long wait in Samoa. So we sort of readjusted ourselves and walked around and got to feeling better. And then we went to Auckland. On the way back, we stopped in Hawaii for a few days and had a few days in Hawaii. And John had been to Hawaii when he was a boy, because they stopped at Hawaii on the ships when they came from New Zealand to California. And he did that trip 3 times because his parents didn't know what to do. It was in the 20s. And they would come to California and they couldn't find any work, and they'd go back to New Zealand. And I don't know who they borrowed money from, but they obviously didn't have any money. So. But anyway, so he knew what Hawaii was like in the 1920s, when the boys would sort of dive for you when you threw coins off the edge of the ship. And then he knew what Hawaii was like during the Second World War, because they stopped off there on their way to the Philippines. And so when we were going to New Zealand, and he said he didn't really want to go to Hawaii because it wouldn't be the way he remembered it. And of course it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was very disappointing for him. I loved Hawaii because the air is so mild.
So then here you are, after John died, you're 57, 58 years old. All the kids are gone, right?
Yes, Tracy's finished Davis, and she's done a year and a half at San Francisco State. Tim is at Berkeley, he's doing postgraduate work. Troy is in Northridge working. And Tom's somewhere in South Los Angeles. What was he doing? Oh, Tom eventually wound up going to the State College in Dominguez Hills and graduating from there.
You're deciding what to do with your life, right? You're alone.
Oh, okay. So John died in 90, and Tracy had finished at San Francisco State. She was at a loose end, and so she came and lived with me for a year. And during that year, she worked at juvenile hall. When Tracy was at Davis, she did Italian. And so she went to San Francisco State with the idea of getting a teaching certificate in Italian, or teaching whatever. But then she found out that there were only 2 schools in California that taught Italian, and there weren't many job opportunities. So anyway, so for a year, she lived with me and taught at juvenile hall. And then we went off to Europe. And she had plans. I don't know whether I was aware, but anyway, so we went and saw the family. Yeah, I don't know, we might have gone to see the family, but anyway, we wound up in France. And in France, she goes off to Spain and I go off to England. And she works in Spain for a couple of years. And then she comes back to California. And
did she stay in Spain with the idea of learning the language?
That was the whole point of the language. She took it at Granada University.
Oh, okay.
And she came back to California to teach Spanish. Right. And she taught Spanish ever since.
Much more common than Italian.
Well, most schools teach Spanish, but only 2 teach Italian. And one of those would be in San Francisco, I'm sure.
So when did you decide to retire?
Now I had a friend, Lee, and Lee explained to me when I was still fairly, maybe only been working 2 or 3 years, how the pension worked. And he said that he planned on retiring when his pension was about 60% of his salary. So I sort of set that as my goal. And anyway, Lee did not do what he promised to do. Lee milked the system, and he probably had 150% of his salary when he retired. But anyway, for me, I got to the age of 60, and I was tired of doing investigation. I didn't want to do it anymore. So I retired. My pension was okay, and I moved up to Paradise.
Okay, why Paradise?
Okay, so for a while I retired and I sold the house and I didn't have anywhere to live. And so I lived some of the time with Tracy and Melanie in Melanie's parents' house, and some of the time with Tim and Ruth. Yeah, Tim and Ruth. And then some of the time with my friend Mary Ann in Huntington Beach. But anyway, so one time Tracy and I are heading to a party. We have to take a bottle of wine. And so we stop at a liquor store. Tracy goes in to get the wine, and she sees a brochure, real estate brochure, for Paradise and Oroville. And she gets it for me. And it just so happened that my friend Susan's husband had been up in Oroville on a case. He was a lawyer, not a judge at that time. And so I said, oh, yeah, that's interesting. So I looked at all these beautiful pictures of houses in the pine trees in Paradise, and I said, I'm going to go check that out. Because I was checking out all around the Bay Area. I would drive up to Fort Bragg and Mendocino and check out places. I went up to the wine country. I knew I couldn't live in farm country because I couldn't speak Spanish, that sort of thing. And so I drove to Paradise and I went to a real estate office and I said, I want someone to show me houses tomorrow. And I met a very nice real estate man. He showed me houses. I didn't find one. I went back again and he showed me a nice house and I bought it.
Houses must have been much cheaper than Southern California then.
I don't know.
Yeah, they had to be, because Paradise was not exactly a number one destination for people.
Oh, of course it was cheaper than Southern California. Yeah. I don't know how much by.
So where was that house?
What?
Where was the house?
Behind Ace Hardware on, oh God, I can't remember the name of the street. There were 3 streets with the same name. Anyway, it was down in a gully behind Ace Hardware.
So off of Pearson? Off of Pearson?
And then you see it. It's off Pearson. Anyway, so I realized after a while that I couldn't own a house because I didn't have anybody who could do the little odd jobs. I'd have to hire a handyman every time. If I wanted to have a toilet seat covered, I couldn't do it myself anymore because my arthritis, my hands just didn't let me do things like that. And I couldn't rake all the leaves and that stuff. And at first, when I moved there, I was going on the roof and clearing the leaves off the roof and doing all kinds of stuff. And then in a very short while, 5 years, I realized, no, I can't do this forever. I'm not going to ever own a house again. So I sold the house and I got a nice rental in the plantation. And I was renting from the Enloe Foundation. And then they'd been left property in the plantation by the developer because he couldn't sell all of them. And so he had he'd made a trust or a donation of houses. And I had one of them. And they said to me, they really didn't want to be managing real estate property. So they were going to sell it. So I thought, I'm going to have hip surgery. they found a renter, but the renter wasn't, I mean, a buyer, but the buyer couldn't move in until I was here for about 6 months after I healed up from my hip surgery. And then I moved in with Pete.
How'd you meet Pete?
11 years.
How did you meet Pete?
Bridge.
Oh,
He was a very good player.
So where were you playing bridge?
I'm sorry?
Where were you playing bridge?
Bridge Club in Chico.
So when did you join AAUW?
When did I do what?
When did you join AAUW?
When I was first living in Paradise, and I went to college for 2 or 3 semesters, and I was standing in line at registration. There was a woman in front of me and a man older than a regular student behind me. And anyway, the 3 of us were talking, and I was saying I was still new and I didn't really know anybody. And this woman suggested I join AAUW. So that was it. I did.
And was Persis there?
Persis is in Chico. This was in Paradise.
Oh, okay.
I met Persis at Bridge. Persis, of course, was doing travel at that time. And she heard me talking about this trip I was going to take to Japan, and she immediately glommed onto me as a traveler. And there we are. The rest is history.
So you went on how many trips with her? Roughly.
I'd have to think about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6.
That's a lot.
Because then I hooked up with Pete, you see. So Pete and I did some traveling. Yeah. I think I was trying to remember why I didn't go on so many trips with her anymore. But it was because I was with Pete. And, Pete and I, we went to Italy and we went to France and we went to England and we drove across the country to Savannah. Maybe that was all we did, but it seemed like a lot.
What had Pete done for a living?
Pete was a butcher.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
You knew that.
Yeah. I had forgotten momentarily.
I mean, it was a shame. It was a waste of a brain, but there we are. Money was more attractive at that time.
That's Monica's problem.
I don't think Pete hated it. I mean, he was okay with it, and he did break it. He did break it because he was a butcher, and then he was a merchant seaman. And then after the merchant seaman, he was building mobile home parks. And then he had some land and he had some sheep and pigs. And he was also a butcher. And then he had his own butcher shop. And that was the last thing he had. So he wasn't stuck.
Right.
Except he always went into something that failed. The butcher profession failed because they unionized it or something. And then the merchant seamen, they failed because they changed the registration business, how you could just register a ship in Panama and use labor from Indonesia instead of a good old American labor. That kind of thing happened. So jobs just disappeared from under his